Have you ever stood on the precipice of a significant achievement, a long-desired goal, a relationship blooming with genuine promise, only to find yourself inexplicably pulling back, making a strange, uncharacteristic mistake, or suddenly feeling all your motivation evaporate like morning mist? Or perhaps you've recognized a more insidious pattern in your life, a recurring sequence of almost successes, brilliant ideas that flicker with immense potential but never quite ignite into sustained, impactful action, or a tendency to attract situations or people that, despite your best conscious intentions, seem to lead you back into familiar cycles of frustration and disappointment. It's a profoundly human, often baffling and deeply frustrating experience. This pervasive sense of being your own worst enemy, of an invisible, internal hand that seems to actively steer you away from the very things you consciously claim to desire most. You see the summit, you know the path, you might even have the tools, yet something within you hesitates, diverts, or even actively dismantles the bridge just as you're about to cross. What if this isn't merely a string of unfortunate coincidences, a simple lack of discipline, a character flaw, or an external world conspiring against you? What if these seemingly disparate acts of self-undermining, these moments where you snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, are in fact interconnected expressions of a deeply ingrained psychological pattern? A cyclical, often unconscious dance with an unseen saboteur that resides not in the stars, nor in your circumstances, but within the complex, often uncharted territory of your own psyche. This is the pervasive, frequently hidden phenomenon of self-sabotage, and it is far more common, far more nuanced, and far more influential in shaping our lives than most of us dare to admit. Welcome. Today we embark on a crucial journey of self-discovery and liberation. Our purpose is not to cast blame, not to induce guilt, nor to offer simplistic, superficial fixes. Instead, our intention is to understand, deeply and compassionately. We will delve into the often shadowy terrain of the human mind, to uncover why we secretly, and often with remarkable, albeit misguided ingenuity, undermine our own success, our own happiness, our own potential for profound growth and authentic fulfillment. In this first part of our four-part exploration, we will lay the foundational groundwork. We will explore the subtle and not so subtle ways self-sabotage insidiously manifests in our daily lives, often disguised as practicality, humility, or even love. And crucially, we will begin to unearth its psychological origins, drawing primarily on the illuminating lens of depth psychology, particularly the profound insights of Carl Jung concerning the shadow and its capacity to harbor our deepest fears, our most painful feelings of unworthiness, and the lingering echoes of past traumas and unmet fundamental needs. Our goal today is to bring this unseen enemy into the light, for only by understanding its roots can we ever hope to transcend its power. Are you ready to confront the saboteur within, not as a monster to be slain, but as a lost part of yourself desperate to be understood? And in doing so, begin the courageous work of reclaiming the life you were truly meant to build, the success you truly deserve. The cycle of self-sabotage often begins with an almost imperceptible whisper, a subtle hesitation, a seemingly rational doubt that creeps in just as we are about to take a significant leap. It rarely announces itself with blaring trumpets and a villainous laugh. Instead, it's a master of disguise, cloaking itself in the garb of reason, prudence, or even noble self-sacrifice. Consider the brilliant creative who has a folder overflowing with half-finished masterpieces, always finding a fatal flaw or a better idea just before completion, thus perpetually avoiding the vulnerability of putting their true work out into the world. Is this perfectionism, or is it a fear of judgment, a fear of failure, or even, paradoxically, a fear of success, all driven by an unconscious belief that they are not truly worthy of recognition? Think of the individual who consistently finds themselves in relationships with partners who are emotionally unavailable, critical, or even abusive, despite a conscious longing for genuine intimacy and respect. Are these just bad choices, or is there an unconscious pattern at play, perhaps a reenactment of early attachment wounds, a deep-seated belief that this is all they deserve, or an unconscious attempt to fix a past pain through a present, and equally doomed dynamic. What about the entrepreneur who, on the cusp of a major business expansion, suddenly starts missing deadlines, making uncharacteristic errors in judgment, or picking fights with key partners? Is this simple stress, or could it be an unconscious fear of the increased responsibility, the heightened visibility, or the potential loss of a familiar, albeit less successful, identity? Self-sabotage can manifest as chronic procrastination, where the fear of not meeting an idealized standard paralyzes us into inaction. It can appear as an addiction to substances, to work, to drama, to digital distraction, anything that numbs the discomfort of facing our true feelings or the daunting task of authentic living. It can hide in our helpful tendency to always put others' needs before our own, to the point of complete self-neglect, thereby ensuring we never have the time or energy to pursue our own aspirations. It can even lurk in our persistent imposter syndrome, that nagging feeling that we are a fraud, about to be exposed despite ample evidence of our competence and achievements. These are not isolated incidents of human fallibility. They are often interconnected strategies, albeit unconscious and ultimately self-defeating, employed by a part of our psyche that is, in its own distorted way, trying to protect us from perceived harm, or to keep us within the bounds of a familiar, if limiting, psychic territory. To truly understand the roots of these self-sabotaging patterns, we must turn to the profound insights of depth psychology, and particularly to Carl Jung's concept of the shadow. As we've explored in previous chronicles, the shadow is not merely our dark side in a simplistic moral sense. It is, more accurately, the unconscious repository of all those aspects of our personality that our conscious ego has, for various reasons, deemed unacceptable, undesirable, too painful, or too threatening to integrate into its self-image. This includes not only socially condemned traits like greed, envy, or aggression, but also, as we noted earlier, potentially positive qualities like assertiveness, if we were taught it was unfeminine or rude, creativity, if it was dismissed as impractical, or even our innate capacity for joy and spontaneity, if our early environment was one of restriction or disapproval. When these vital parts of ourselves are relegated to the shadow, they don't simply cease to exist, they continue to live within us, often carrying a significant emotional charge and a desperate unmet need for recognition and expression. And it is from this denied, repressed, and often wounded place that many of our self-sabotaging impulses arise. Consider the deep-seated, perhaps unconscious, fear of failure. If, in our formative years, failure was met with harsh criticism, ridicule, or the withdrawal of love, our psyche might learn that failure is an existential threat. To avoid this perceived threat, the shadow might then orchestrate a series of near misses, or a complete avoidance of challenging situations. It's a paradoxical protection. By ensuring we don't even truly try, it saves us from the anticipated pain of a more public or definitive failure. The conscious ego might lament the lack of achievement, but the shadow breathes a sigh of relief for having averted a greater, albeit imagined, catastrophe. Similarly, a core belief of unworthiness, often internalized from early experiences of not feeling seen, valued, or loved for who we truly are, can become a powerful engine of self-sabotage. If, deep down, you don't believe you deserve success, happiness, or healthy love, a part of your psyche, the shadow carrying this painful belief, will unconsciously find ways to ensure that you don't attain or sustain these things. You might attract partners who confirm your unworthiness, or you might undermine your own achievements just as they are about to solidify, because success would create an unbearable cognitive dissonance with that deeply ingrained feeling of, I am not enough. Past traumas, whether overt and dramatic or subtle and cumulative, like chronic emotional neglect, also play a significant role in fueling self-sabotage. Traumatic experiences can shatter our sense of safety, our trust in ourselves and the world, and our belief in a benevolent future. The psyche, in an attempt to cope, might develop self-sabotaging patterns as a way of maintaining a sense of control, even if it's control over a negative outcome, or as a way of reenacting the trauma in an unconscious attempt to master it, or simply as a manifestation of a nervous system perpetually stuck in a fight, flight, or freeze response, unable to move forward into a more expansive life. Furthermore, unmet fundamental human needs, the need for love and belonging, the need for safety and security, the need for autonomy and self-expression, the need for meaning and purpose, if consistently frustrated, can lead to a kind of psychic starvation. Self-sabotaging behaviors, particularly addictions or compulsive acts, can then emerge as desperate, albeit dysfunctional, attempts to fill this inner void, to temporarily soothe the ache of these unmet needs, or to create a fleeting illusion of control or connection. It is crucial to approach this understanding with immense self-compassion. Self-sabotage is not born from a desire to suffer, but from a deeply misguided attempt to avoid suffering, or to manage an internal pain that feels too overwhelming to confront directly. The unseen enemy within is not a malicious entity, but more often a collection of wounded, frightened, and disowned parts of ourselves, all clamoring for healing, for recognition, for integration into a larger, more compassionate whole. Recognizing these roots, the fears embedded in our shadow, the echoes of past hurts, the cry of unmet needs, is the foundational first step. It moves us from a place of self-blame and confusion, why do I keep doing this to myself, to a place of deeper self-understanding and the potential for conscious change. This pattern is connected to that old fear, or that unmet need for safety. This self-awareness is not an instant cure, but it is the essential light that we must bring into the dark passages of our inner labyrinth. It allows us to see the saboteur not as an alien force, but as an integral part of our own complex story, a part that, once understood and met with compassion, can begin to transform from an obstacle into an unexpected source of wisdom and strength. In the next part of our journey, we will unmask some of the most common archetypal faces of this inner saboteur: the procrastinator, the perfectionist, the imposter, the martyr, and explore the surprising, often hidden, psychological payoffs that keep these destructive cycles so stubbornly in motion, despite their obvious and painful costs. And in doing so, we will move one step closer to truly breaking free. In our preceding exploration, we illuminated the foundational roots of self-sabotage, tracing its origins to the disowned aspects of our psyche. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, which harbors our deepest fears, our feelings of unworthiness, and the lingering echoes of past traumas and unmet needs. We acknowledge that this unseen enemy within is not a malicious entity, but rather a collection of wounded parts crying out for understanding and integration. Now, armed with this foundational awareness, we venture deeper into the labyrinth of our own self-undermining behaviors. For self-sabotage is rarely a monolithic force. It often wears many faces, manifesting through distinct, recognizable patterns of thought, feeling, and action. These patterns we can understand as inner saboteurs, archetypal energies, or sub-personalities within us that, while often operating from a place of perceived self-protection or misguided attempts to meet old needs, ultimately keep us trapped in cycles of frustration and unfulfillment. To truly break free, we must not only understand the why of self-sabotage, but also the how. This means unmasking these common inner saboteurs, recognizing their signature moves, and, crucially, uncovering the often surprising hidden payoffs or secondary gains that keep these destructive cycles so stubbornly in motion, despite their obvious and painful costs. It is only by bringing these unconscious dynamics into the light of conscious awareness that we can begin to dismantle their power over us. Let us begin by meeting some of the most prevalent of these inner saboteurs. As I describe them, see if you recognize any of them as familiar, perhaps unwelcome, residents within your own psyche, or in the behavior of those around you. First, there is the procrastinator. This saboteur is a master of delay, an artist of avoidance. It whispers seductive promises of, "I'll do it tomorrow," "I just need to feel more inspired," or "the conditions aren't quite perfect yet." The procrastinator often targets our most important, most meaningful, and potentially most life-changing tasks. The creative project that could launch a new career, the difficult conversation that could heal a relationship, the healthy habit that could transform our well-being. On the surface, the procrastinator seems to be about laziness or poor time management. But delve deeper, and you'll often find its roots in a profound fear of failure, a fear of judgment, or even a fear of success. By never truly starting, or by perpetually delaying completion, the procrastinator protects us from the perceived pain of potential criticism, the sting of not meeting an idealized standard, or the overwhelming responsibility that might come with genuine achievement. The hidden payoff here is the avoidance of vulnerability, the temporary illusion of safety found in inaction. The cost, however, is a life filled with unfulfilled potential, nagging guilt, and the quiet despair of dreams deferred. It is, as Jung might suggest, a way the shadow ensures we remain small and safe from the imagined terrors of authentic engagement with life's challenges. Next, meet the perfectionist. This saboteur operates under the guise of high standards and an unwavering commitment to excellence. It insists that everything must be flawless, impeccable, beyond reproach before it can be shared with the world, or even before it can be deemed good enough for our own satisfaction. The perfectionist can drive us to meticulous effort, which in some measure can be positive. However, its shadow aspect is a crippling fear of imperfection, which it equates with fundamental unworthiness. The perfectionist will have you endlessly tweaking, revising, polishing, often to the point where the initial spark of creativity is extinguished, or the deadline has long passed, or the opportunity has vanished. It sets impossibly high bars, ensuring that you almost always fall short, thus reinforcing a core belief of, "I am not good enough." The hidden payoff for the perfectionist is the avoidance of criticism. If it's never finished, it can't be judged. A fleeting sense of control in a chaotic world, and sometimes a way to maintain a superior self-image by never having to truly test one's abilities in the messy arena of reality. The cost is immense: chronic stress, burnout, an inability to enjoy the process, and a life where many great projects die in the almost perfect stage. This can be seen as a persona-driven defense, where the mask of striving for excellence hides a terrified shadow that cannot bear to be seen as flawed. Then there is the imposter. This insidious saboteur whispers that you are a fraud, that your achievements are due to luck or deception, and that it's only a matter of time before you are found out and exposed as incompetent or unworthy. The imposter can coexist with remarkable external success, hounding even the most accomplished individuals with a persistent, gnawing sense of self-doubt and a fear of being unmasked. The imposter will have you downplaying your successes, deflecting compliments, overworking to prove your worth, a task that is never truly completed in its eyes, and living in constant anxiety of being revealed. It often arises from early experiences where one's true abilities were not adequately mirrored or validated, or where love and acceptance felt conditional upon performance. The hidden payoff of the imposter is a strange one. By constantly anticipating exposure, it creates a perverse sense of preparedness for an imagined catastrophic failure. And it also, in a twisted way, protects the ego from the vulnerability of truly owning one's successes and the responsibilities that might come with them. It's a way of staying small and humble, even if that humility is a painful, self-imposed limitation. The cost is a chronic lack of self-esteem, an inability to internalize achievements, and a life lived under a cloud of undeserved shame and anxiety. Consider also the martyr, or the people pleaser. This saboteur operates under the noble guise of selflessness, altruism, and an unwavering dedication to the needs of others. The martyr consistently prioritizes everyone else's happiness and well-being above their own, often to the point of complete self-exhaustion and resentment. They find it incredibly difficult to say no, to set healthy boundaries, or to ask for their own needs to be met. On the surface, the martyr appears virtuous, but Jung might point to a shadow driven by a deep fear of rejection, a desperate need for approval, or an unconscious belief that their worth is solely determined by how much they do for others. The hidden payoff for the martyr is the temporary validation they receive for being so good and so indispensable, a sense of moral superiority and the avoidance of confronting their own needs and desires, which might feel selfish or threatening. The cost, however, is immense: loss of self, chronic resentment, burnout, and often relationships built on obligation rather than genuine mutual affection. They give until they have nothing left, and then often wonder why they feel so empty and unappreciated. And let us not forget the inner critic, often the overarching voice director of many other saboteurs. This is that relentless internal voice that judges, demeans, and finds fault with almost everything you do, think, or feel. It's the voice that tells you you're not smart enough, not attractive enough, not talented enough, not worthy enough. It replays past mistakes on an endless loop and catastrophizes future possibilities. The inner critic often internalizes the critical voices of parents, teachers, or significant figures from our past. Its hidden payoff is, paradoxically, a misguided attempt at self-protection. By criticizing ourselves first, we preempt the anticipated criticism from others, or we motivate ourselves through fear, believing that harsh self-judgment is necessary for improvement or to avoid complacency. It can also be a way the shadow expresses its rage or frustration in an inward direction. The cost is devastating: chronic low self-esteem, anxiety, depression, a stifling of creativity, and a fundamental inability to experience self-compassion or genuine joy. These are just a few of the common faces of our inner saboteurs. You might recognize one or several, or a unique combination of them operating within your own psyche. The crucial insight here is that these patterns, however destructive, are not random. They are often learned coping mechanisms developed in response to early life experiences, and they persist because, on some unconscious level, they offer a payoff, a way to avoid a perceived greater pain, to fulfill an old unmet need, however inadequately, or to maintain a familiar, albeit limiting, sense of self in a predictable, if painful, world. Understanding these hidden payoffs is absolutely key to dismantling the self-sabotage cycle. If we only try to fight the behavior, e.g., I must stop procrastinating, without understanding and addressing the underlying fear or need that the procrastinator is trying to manage, e.g., the fear of judgment, the need to feel safe from criticism, our efforts are likely to be short-lived, or the sabotage will simply manifest in a different form. It's like cutting the weeds without removing the roots. This requires a shift from self-criticism, "Why am I so lazy, stupid, weak?" to self-curiosity. What is this pattern really trying to achieve for me? What pain is it trying to help me avoid? What unmet need is it trying, however clumsily, to fulfill? When we can approach our inner saboteurs with this kind of compassionate inquiry, we begin to loosen their grip. We start to see them not as monstrous enemies, but as misguided, often childlike, parts of ourselves that are stuck in old survival strategies. This perspective, rooted in Jungian depth psychology and echoed in many ancient wisdom traditions, opens the door to a different kind of engagement. Not one of battle, but one of dialogue, understanding, and ultimately, integration. It allows us to ask, if this saboteur is trying to protect me from something or get me something I need, is there a healthier, more conscious, more adult way to achieve that same underlying goal? In the next part of our series, we will explore precisely this, drawing upon the timeless strategies of ancient wisdom, particularly Stoicism and Eastern philosophies, to discover practical, empowering ways to disarm these inner saboteurs, to address their underlying needs more directly, and to cultivate the inner resilience and wisdom needed to consciously choose a path of authentic growth and fulfillment, rather than being unconsciously driven by these old, self-limiting patterns. In our ongoing exploration of the self-sabotage cycle, we've journeyed into the often shadowed recesses of the psyche. We first acknowledge the unseen enemy within, understanding that self-sabotage is not a mere lack of willpower, but often a symptom of deeper fears, unhealed wounds, and unmet needs, frequently rooted in Carl Jung's concept of the shadow. Then, in part 2, we unmasked some of the common archetypal inner saboteurs: the procrastinator, the perfectionist, the imposter, the martyr, and the inner critic, and began to understand the hidden psychological payoffs that fuel their persistent, destructive patterns. Knowledge and awareness are crucial first steps. But awareness alone, as we've noted, is not enough to break free from deeply ingrained cycles. We need actionable strategies, timeless tools to not only recognize these inner saboteurs, but to effectively disarm them, to redirect their misguided energies, and to cultivate a more resilient, authentic, and self-allied way of being. For this, we turn now to the profound, practical, and enduring wisdom of ancient philosophies, traditions that have, for millennia, offered powerful frameworks for navigating the complexities of the human mind and AIBTULLLAHITIAATINEGE inner warfare. We will focus particularly on the robust insights of Stoicism and the contemplative depths of Eastern thought. Let us first consider the Stoics, philosophers like Epictetus, a former slave who became a revered teacher, Seneca, a statesman and playwright who navigated the treacherous courts of Nero, and Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor who penned his meditations amidst military campaigns and personal grief. These were not ivory tower academics. They were men deeply engaged with the harsh realities of life, and their philosophy was, above all, a practical art of living, a guide to achieving eudaimonia, a state of flourishing and inner tranquility, regardless of external circumstances. One of the absolute cornerstones of Stoic thought, and a powerful antidote to many forms of self-sabotage, is the dichotomy of control. Epictetus stated it with stark clarity. Some things are within our power, while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, reputation, office, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. How does this relate to disarming our inner saboteurs? Many of our self-sabotaging behaviors are fueled by an anxious and ultimately futile attempt to control things that are, in reality, outside of our direct control. The opinions of others, fueling the people-pleaser or the imposter. The final outcome of a project, fueling the perfectionist's fear of releasing imperfect work. Or future uncertainties, fueling the procrastinator's avoidance. The Stoic practice here is a radical act of discernment, to constantly, rigorously, and honestly distinguish between what we can control, our thoughts, our judgments, our intentions, our actions, our responses, and what we cannot control, everything else, the past, the future, other people's reactions, external events. When the procrastinator whispers that you can't start until conditions are perfect, the Stoic reminds you that perfect conditions are not in your control, but your effort today is. When the imposter screams that others will judge you harshly, the Stoic calmly inquires, are their judgments within my power? No. Is the integrity of my effort within my power? Yes. This practice doesn't lead to passivity. It leads to focused, effective action on what truly matters, and a profound letting go of the anxiety associated with what doesn't. It starves the saboteurs that feed on external validation or fear of external outcomes. The hidden payoff. The procrastinator seeks avoidance of judgment on an imperfect outcome becomes irrelevant if your focus is solely on the virtuous effort you can control now. Another potent Stoic technique is negative visualization, or premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. This isn't about pessimistic wallowing. It's a pragmatic mental exercise. The Stoics would consciously spend time imagining potential setbacks, losses, or difficulties, not to invite them, but to strip them of their power to shock and derail should they actually occur. How does this disarm an inner saboteur like the perfectionist, who is often paralyzed by the fear of things going wrong? By mentally rehearsing potential imperfections or criticisms, by imagining the worst-case scenario and then contemplating how one would cope with it virtuously, the perfectionist's terror of the unknown or the flawed is significantly diminished. You realize that even if your work isn't universally acclaimed, even if you face criticism, even if you fail by some external standard, you can still maintain your inner composure, your integrity, your ability to learn and try again. The hidden payoff of the perfectionist, avoiding the imagined catastrophic shame of imperfection, is deflated when you've already calmly contemplated that catastrophe and realized your inner core can remain intact. Furthermore, the Stoic concept of amor fati, the love of one's fate, offers a radical reframe for the saboteurs fueled by resentment, victimhood, often a component of the martyr, or a longing for a different past or present. Amor fati doesn't mean a passive resignation to suffering. It means an active, courageous embrace of what is, of all that life brings, both the good and the bad, as raw material for the practice of virtue and the expression of our character. When the martyr feels a surge of resentment for having to do everything for everyone, amor fati invites a shift. This situation, however challenging, is my current reality. How can I meet it with wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance? What opportunity for growth does it offer? This doesn't mean condoning mistreatment, but it shifts the focus from powerless complaint to empowered response. The hidden payoff of the martyr, a sense of moral superiority or a way to garner sympathy, loses its allure when replaced by the profound satisfaction of meeting life's challenges with inner strength and dignity. Now, let us turn to the contemplative traditions of the East, particularly Buddhism and related mindfulness practices, which offer complementary and equally powerful strategies for disarming our inner saboteur. A central practice here is mindfulness, which involves paying attention to the present moment, to our thoughts, emotions, bodily sensations, and external environment, with non-judgmental awareness. Many of our inner saboteurs thrive in the realm of unexamined automatic reactivity. The inner critic launches an attack, and we immediately believe it and spiral into self-loathing. The procrastinator whispers a distraction, and we unconsciously follow. Mindfulness creates a crucial space between stimulus and response. When the inner critic's voice arises, mindfulness allows us to observe it as just a thought pattern, perhaps a very old and familiar one, rather than an absolute truth about who we are. We can notice it, acknowledge its presence. There's the critic again, without becoming entangled in its narrative or immediately succumbing to its emotional charge. This act of disidentification is incredibly liberating. The hidden payoff of the inner critic, perhaps a misguided attempt to motivate us through fear, loses its power when we realize we don't have to believe every thought that pops into our head. Similarly, when the urge to procrastinate arises, mindfulness allows us to observe the feeling of discomfort or anxiety that the procrastinator is trying to help us escape. Instead of automatically reaching for a distraction, we can sit with that discomfort for a moment, breathe into it, and perhaps even investigate its source. This creates the possibility of making a more conscious choice, rather than being driven by an unconscious aversion. Another key concept from Eastern thought, particularly Buddhism, is non-attachment or non-clinging. This is often misunderstood as a cold detachment or an indifference to life. In reality, it is a profound understanding of impermanence and a release from the kind of rigid clinging to specific outcomes, identities, or possessions that so often fuels our suffering and our self-sabotaging behaviors. The perfectionist, for example, is deeply attached to an idealized outcome of flawless work. The imposter is attached to maintaining a facade of perfect competence. The people pleaser is attached to the approval of others. Non-attachment invites us to engage fully in our endeavors, to strive with diligence and care, but to simultaneously loosen our desperate grip on the results. We do our best, and then we let go, accepting that the outcome is, in many ways, beyond our complete control, echoing the Stoic dichotomy of control. This practice significantly disarms saboteurs that are driven by fear of loss or fear of not achieving a specific, rigidly defined success. If your self-worth is not solely tied to a perfect outcome, the perfectionist has less ammunition. If your peace of mind doesn't depend on everyone liking you, the people pleaser loses much of its anxious urgency. The hidden payoff of many saboteurs, e.g., the perfectionist's attempt to control an uncertain future by controlling every detail now, is undermined when we cultivate an inner spaciousness that can accommodate imperfection, change, and a wider range of outcomes. Finally, many Eastern traditions emphasize the cultivation of self-compassion. This is a vital antidote to the harshness of the inner critic and the shame that often underlies the imposter or addictive self-sabotage. Self-compassion involves treating ourselves with the same kindness, understanding, and support that we would offer to a good friend who is struggling. It means acknowledging our imperfections and our suffering without judgment, recognizing that these are part of the shared human experience. When the inner critic attacks, self-compassion allows us to say, "I hear that critical voice, and I know it's trying to protect me in some way, but I choose to treat myself with kindness right now. I am doing the best I can." This doesn't mean condoning harmful behavior, but it creates an inner environment of safety and acceptance that is far more conducive to genuine change and growth than relentless self-flagellation. The hidden payoff of the inner critic, a misguided attempt to force self-improvement through harshness, is replaced by the much more effective and sustainable motivation that comes from self-acceptance and a genuine desire for well-being. Integrating these ancient strategies, the Stoic focus on inner control, virtuous response, and acceptance of fate, alongside the Eastern emphasis on mindfulness, non-attachment, and self-compassion, provides us with a formidable toolkit for our inner warfare against self-sabotage. They teach us to become keen observers of our own minds, to disidentify from our fleeting thoughts and destructive impulses, to cultivate emotional resilience, and to anchor our sense of self not in the shifting sands of external validation or idealized outcomes, but in the bedrock of our own conscious choices and our commitment to living a life of integrity and purpose. These are not quick fixes. They are lifelong practices requiring consistent effort and a willingness to repeatedly turn inwards with honesty and courage. But each small act of conscious choice, each moment of mindful observation, each instance of self-compassionate response weakens the grip of our inner saboteurs and strengthens the voice of our authentic self. In the final part of our series, we will explore Carl Jung's overarching vision for this journey of liberation, the process of individuation. We will see how consciously engaging with our shadow and applying the kind of wisdom we've explored from these ancient traditions can lead us not just to overcome self-sabotage, but to transform our inner saboteurs into surprising allies, ultimately guiding us towards a life of greater wholeness, meaning, and authentic power. Welcome to the culminating chapter of our journey into the intricate, often challenging, but ultimately liberating world of understanding and overcoming self-sabotage. In our previous explorations, we first unmasked the unseen enemy within, recognizing that self-sabotage often stems from the disowned, fearful, or wounded aspects of our psyche, what Carl Jung termed the shadow. We then identified some of the common archetypal inner saboteurs: the procrastinator, the perfectionist, the imposter, the martyr, and the inner critic, and courageously examined the hidden psychological payoffs that keep their destructive cycles in motion. Most recently, in Part 3, we drew upon the timeless, practical wisdom of ancient philosophies like Stoicism and Eastern thought, equipping ourselves with strategies to begin disarming these internal saboteurs by cultivating inner control, mindfulness, non-attachment, and self-compassion. Now, as we stand at this significant juncture, armed with greater awareness and practical tools, we turn to the overarching vision of Carl Jung for a truly profound and lasting transformation. For Jung, merely managing or suppressing our self-sabotaging tendencies was not the ultimate goal. His life's work pointed towards a far more ambitious, far more holistic aim: the journey of individuation. This is the path to not just ceasing self-sabotage, but to actively integrating those very parts of ourselves that once fueled it, transforming them from inner enemies into powerful, indispensable allies, and in doing so, becoming our own most steadfast champion on the path to a whole, authentic, and deeply meaningful life. Individuation, as Jung conceived it, is the psyche's innate, lifelong striving to become an individual, a separate, distinct, and indivisible whole, fully realizing its unique potential. It is the process by which a person becomes the true self that they were always meant to be, moving beyond the confines of the conditioned persona, the collective shoulds, and the unconscious dictates of their unintegrated shadow. It is a journey from a state of internal fragmentation and external dependency towards a state of inner coherence, self-reliance, and authentic self-expression. How does this grand vision of individuation specifically help us break free from the self-sabotage cycle and, more importantly, transform its underlying energies into forces for growth? The key lies in Jung's radical understanding of the shadow and the necessity of its conscious integration. We've learned that our inner saboteurs are often manifestations of our disowned shadow aspects. The procrastinator might be a shadow part terrified of failure or judgment. The perfectionist, a shadow part petrified of being seen as flawed or unworthy. The inner critic, perhaps a shadow that has internalized harsh external voices or is expressing repressed anger inwards. Simply trying to silence these voices or to willpower our way past their resistance often proves futile in the long run, because we are essentially trying to suppress a vital part of our own psychic energy. Jung's approach is not one of suppression, but of courageous, compassionate shadow integration. This is the conscious, deliberate process of turning towards these disowned parts, of bringing them out of the darkness of the unconscious into the light of awareness, not to indulge their destructive manifestations, but to understand their origins, their unmet needs, their hidden wisdom, and ultimately to reclaim the valuable psychic energy that has been locked within. Imagine the procrastinator again. Instead of berating yourself for your lack of discipline, Jung would invite you to engage with this part. What is it truly afraid of? If it's a fear of judgment, can you offer that part of yourself compassion and reassurance? Can you break down the daunting task into smaller, less threatening steps, thereby reducing the perceived risk? Can you reframe failure not as a catastrophe, but as a learning opportunity? As you begin to understand and address the underlying fear that fuels the procrastinator, its power to sabotage you diminishes. Moreover, the energy that was previously bound up in avoidance can be liberated and redirected towards creative action. That fear of judgment, once integrated, might even transform into a healthy discernment about whose opinions truly matter. Consider the perfectionist. Its relentless pursuit of an unattainable ideal often stems from a deep-seated feeling of not being good enough, a core wound likely residing in the shadow. Shadow work here involves acknowledging this feeling of inadequacy without letting it define you. It means cultivating self-acceptance, practicing self-compassion for your inevitable human imperfections, and learning to find value in the process, not just the flawless outcome. As you integrate the vulnerability that the perfectionist so desperately tries to avoid, its tyrannical grip loosens. You might discover that good enough is often truly sufficient, and that embracing imperfection can unlock a new level of creative freedom and joy. The energy once consumed by obsessive tweaking can now flow into new beginnings. Even the inner critic, perhaps the most insidious of saboteurs, holds a hidden potential when approached through the lens of shadow integration. This harsh voice, as we've discussed, might be an internalized echo of past criticism or a distorted expression of repressed anger or frustration. Consciously working with the inner critic involves, first, disidentifying from its pronouncements, recognizing that its voice is not your ultimate truth. Then it involves a compassionate inquiry. What is this critic really trying to protect me from? Is there a legitimate concern hidden beneath its harsh delivery? Can I acknowledge that concern without succumbing to its self-destructive tone? Through this process, the inner critic can, over time, be transformed. Its harshness can be tempered, its fear-based motivation can be understood, and its underlying energy, perhaps a desire for competence or a striving for excellence, can be rechanneled into a more constructive inner mentor or a discerning guide. This guide still offers critical feedback, but from a place of wisdom and support, rather than shame and condemnation. This transformative work of shadow integration is central to Jung's path of individuation, and is the ultimate antidote to the self-sabotage cycle. It is not about becoming a perfect person devoid of flaws or negative tendencies. It is about becoming a whole person, one who is increasingly aware of and in conscious relationship with all aspects of their psyche, the light and the dark, the strengths and the vulnerabilities, the persona and the shadow. When we consistently engage in this integrative work, our self-awareness deepens profoundly. We become more adept at recognizing the subtle, early warning signs of our self-sabotaging patterns and the shadow dynamics that fuel them. Our emotional resilience grows. By facing and processing the difficult emotions often held within the shadow, fear, shame, grief, anger, we become less afraid of them, less reactive to them, and more capable of navigating life's inevitable challenges with greater equanimity. Our authenticity blossoms. As we reclaim and integrate disowned parts of ourselves, we become less reliant on the persona for validation and more able to express our true self in the world, with all its unique complexities and contradictions. Our creativity and vitality are unleashed. The psychic energy that was previously locked up in repression, projection, and internal conflict becomes available for constructive, life-affirming pursuits. Our relationships often transform. As we become less prone to projecting our shadow onto others and more grounded in our own authentic center, we are able to engage with others from a place of greater clarity, compassion, and genuine connection, attracting relationships that mirror our growing wholeness. Becoming your own ally in this way is not a one-time achievement. It is an ongoing commitment, a way of life. It requires consistent self-reflection, a willingness to be uncomfortable, and a deep trust in the psyche's inherent capacity for healing and growth. It means understanding that mistakes and setbacks are not signs of failure in the individuation process, but often crucial opportunities for deeper shadow work and further integration. The ancient wisdom traditions we touched upon in Part 3 offer invaluable support for this Jungian path. The Stoic practice of focusing on what is within our control, our responses, our choices, is essential when confronting the often overwhelming material that emerges from the unconscious. The Eastern practices of mindfulness and non-judgmental observation are fundamental to developing the self-awareness needed to recognize our shadow projections and our inner saboteurs in action. And the cultivation of self-compassion is the bedrock upon which all lasting inner work is built, allowing us to meet our most difficult parts with kindness rather than condemnation. So, how do you actively become your own ally and transform these saboteurs? 1. Commit to consistent self-reflection. Dedicate regular time, daily, weekly, for practices like journaling, meditation, or simply quiet contemplation. Ask yourself, what self-sabotaging patterns have I noticed recently? What emotions or situations trigger them? What might my shadow be trying to communicate through these patterns? 2. Practice active imagination, a Jungian technique. When a strong emotion or a saboteur voice arises, instead of suppressing it or acting it out, try to engage with it symbolically. You might visualize it as a figure, give it a voice, and enter into a dialogue with it in your imagination. Ask it what it wants, what it fears, what it needs. This can yield profound insights. 3. Seek wise mirrors. While the journey is internal, we don't have to walk it entirely alone. Trusted friends, mentors, or a qualified Jungian therapist can act as wise mirrors, helping us to see our blind spots, to understand our projections, and to navigate the more challenging aspects of shadow integration with support and guidance. 4. Embrace sacred failures. Reframe setbacks not as proof of your inadequacy, as the inner critic would have you believe, but as essential data points on your individuation journey. What can you learn from this? How can this experience lead you to a deeper understanding of your shadow and a more compassionate relationship with yourself? 5. Nourish your true self. Actively engage in activities, relationships, and pursuits that align with your deepest values, that spark your genuine joy, and that allow for the expression of your unique talents, even if they don't fit your old persona or societal shoulds. This strengthens the true self and gradually diminishes the power of the saboteurs that thrive on a starved soul. Breaking free from the self-sabotage cycle through Jungian integration and the support of ancient wisdom is not about waging a war against parts of yourself. It is about ending an internal war. It is about a profound act of self-reclamation, of calling home all the exiled, forgotten, and misunderstood aspects of your being, and inviting them to contribute their unique energies to the creation of a more whole, more authentic, and more powerfully alive you. This is the essence of becoming your own most powerful ally. When the parts of you that once worked in the shadows to undermine you are brought into the light of consciousness, understood with compassion, and their energies rechanneled with wisdom, they cease to be saboteurs. They become, instead, integrated aspects of your strength, your resilience, your creativity, and your unique, irreplaceable humanity. The path out of the self-sabotage cycle is, ultimately, the path of individuation itself. It is the courageous choice to stop being an unconscious victim of your own internal dynamics and to become the conscious, compassionate, and empowered architect of your own life. A life lived not in secret opposition to yourself, but in profound and ever-deepening alliance with all that you are and all that you are capable of becoming. This journey, this commitment to wholeness, is perhaps the greatest survival chronicle any of us can ever write.